Hey guys, Jason from Out on the Lawn. Hope you're having a great day today. Today, we're brewing beer. Stay tuned. Alright, so today we are out in the garage making an extract beer kit. This is from Brewer's Best. We're making an American Pale Wheat today. So I'll go through a quick setup here. Got a double propane burner with a small pot on the right, which is going to be used to steep our grains, and then the larger pot on the left is the boil kettle. And we got our 6-gallon carboy here. That's where the primary fermentation is going to be in. Got an empty water jug there just for transferring water. I got about 2.5 gallons of sanitizing solution here, just Star San. You can use any other brewer's sanitizer. Got a homemade wort chiller here, and I'll explain what that does later. Got our stir stick here, and then let's open up this kit and see what we have inside. I know there's some kind of specialty grains here, but let's see what we got. So the very top of the box here says what we have inside. So it looks like we have 2 cans of wheat liquid malt extract. That's what a LME means. Then we have 2 pounds of specialty grains, 1 pound of pale, 1 pound of flaked wheat, and we have 1 ounce of Mount Hood hops and a packet of yeast. Well, let's unbox this here and see what we got. Looks like I got our steeping bag here. Priming sugar, we won't be using that until bottling day. A bunch of little cards and placards. Cascade pellets. That's hops. I didn't see that on the ingredient list. There's the Mount Hood pellets. Our caps, won't use that till bottling day. Now we get to the good stuff. We got 2 cans of liquid malt extract from wheat. 1 pound of crushed pale. And 1 pound of flaked wheat. So my guess, once we look at the instructions, we're going to be dealing with that first. So let's find the instructions here and see what we need to do. So recommended equipment, 4-gallon brew pot or larger, we have that. 6.5-gallon fermenter, that's what I have. An airlock, got that. A large spoon or paddle, I have that. Hydrometer, thermometer, sanitizer, and cleanser. We've got all that as well. Hydrometer you don't need, but it's convenient to know in order to calculate your alcohol content when all is done. So let's look at the brew tips here. We suggest doing a 2.5-gallon boil at minimum. If you have the equipment to boil more than 2.5 gallons, feel free to do so. There's no need to change the amount of any of the ingredients. 2. The grains should not be compacted inside the bag. Grains should steep loosely, allowing the hot water to soak into all of the grain evenly. Pay careful attention not to let your steeping water exceed 170 degrees, which leaches tannins into the wort. Wort is just a term for unfermented beer. Run the canisters of the LME under hot water to allow it to pour easier. And pay attention that it doesn't caramelize at the bottom of the pot, which could cause it to burn. When consumed, hops can cause malignant hypothermia. Okay, we don't care about that. So then here is what you're actually supposed to do. So at the boil time, the total boil time is 1 hour. And at the very beginning, when it starts to boil, is when you add 1 ounce of your hops. Boil it for 30 minutes, and then you add, looks like you add 1 can of LME first, and then you add your other can later. So if we go to the recommended procedures, read everything, sanitize everything, steep your grains, see steep to convert insert. So that's what this is. So your insert here. So this replaces step number 3, which is step number 3 here. For every 2 pounds of grain included in this recipe, pour 1 gallon of water into the brew pot. You may need to steep your grains in a smaller pot on your stove top if the volume of water is not deep enough in your boil kettle for the grains to be fully submerged. And that's why I have the smaller pot here, offset to the right. Pour the crushed grains into the bag and tie a loose knot at the top of the bag. Raise the temperature of the water to 155. Place the grain bag into the brew pot. Let it soak. Carefully monitor the temperature. Drops below 150. 148, 152. Do not exceed 155. Steep for 45 minutes. Remove the bag of grain. Pour approximately half gallon of 150 degree clean water through the bag if we want to rinse it, which we probably won't. Then we add enough water to bring the total volume up to 2.5 gallons for the boil. Now we go on to step 4 here. Start your boil. Gentle rolling boil. Add only 1 of the included cans of LME to the boiling wort. Continuously stir the extract into the wort as it returns to a gentle rolling boil. Alright, I think that's enough to start, so I think what we'll do is we'll cut open our bags of grains, throw them in this little filter bag, and get those going in this preheated small pot with 1 gallon of water in it. Alright, we got our grains in our steeping bag here. Just be aware that this can be a very dusty process. So what we're going to do is just kind of shake it around, get a lot of the major amounts of dust out. Probably doesn't have to be done because it'll settle out eventually in your fermenter. It'll be part of the sludge at the bottom, but I'm just trying to minimize as much as I can. So now it's time to add it to our water, which is at 156, 57 right now, and it will cool a few degrees once you add it. I believe this steep to convert said you can make it a little bit warmer and it will cool off. I read it somewhere, but I've done this before and I know it cools down. Okay, so we're going to add this. I do have the flame on low. And hang this there so it doesn't get burned. I'm going to take our spoon here and just kind of lightly massage it to not create any dough balls. That fell in, that's fine. I'll scoop it out momentarily. You can see that all of the grains are completely submerged, but just barely, which is why I'm doing it in this smaller pot instead of just doing it in a large brew kettle. And man, does this smell good. Holy cow. It smells so sweet and doughy. You can smell the sugars in it. Alright, so I'm going to pull this up, let this hang over the side for a second and cool off. And we're going to steep for 45 minutes like the instructions said, so I'll catch you in a little bit. Alright, here we are about 20 minutes later. I did add about 2 gallons of just regular hot tap water to the boil kettle, and I started that flame on medium to get it close to boiling for when this is done. We don't have to wait as long for it to boil. Temperature's holding steady right around 150 to 151. I do have to fire up the burner about every 5 minutes or so for about a minute and stir it around to keep it in the temp zone. But yeah, it's coming along good so far, and we got about 23 minutes left until we can dump all this water into here, and the grains do absorb a lot of the water, so it won't be a full gallon that I get out of here. So with 2 gallons added to here, I'll probably have just under 3 gallons for the boil itself. So what I'm going to do here in a minute is probably bring one of these inside and start soaking it in a sink of hot water to, loosen it up a bit so it pours better. I think one of the confusing things when I first started getting into home brewing was with the extract kits. It's not made clear up front that the amount of water that you boil isn't really that critical, because it's just a concentrate anyway. So the final, if you see here on the box, the final volume that you're going to get is 5 gallons, but the instructions only say to boil 2.5 gallons at a minimum or more if you can. And I never really understood that the first couple of times I did it, but basically what you're doing is you're only filling up this about halfway with the actual wort, which is the unfermented beer that you boil, and then you pour it in here, and then you just top it off with distilled water. So the actual amount that you do in here doesn't really matter. You can think of it kind of like those frozen like orange juice concentrates that you get at the store that you eventually have to mix in with water anyway. The amount of the concentrate doesn't really matter here because you're using the same amount of grains and the same amount of the liquid malt extract. I just thought I'd try to make that clear because it can be confusing for beginner brewers. Alright, I'll catch you guys in a little bit. Alright, we're back. The timer just went off. It's been 45 minutes. So what we're going to do is remove this temperature probe because we don't need this anymore. I was stirring this, kind of mashing it around, prodding it a little bit occasionally, so now I need to find, there we go, stem, pull that out, enough to cool. So I can do this with my hand. Alright. Grab this and pull it out. It's pretty hot, but not too hot to hold. I'm just gonna let this drain here for a couple minutes. Get all the good stuff out that we can get. Meanwhile, this other pot over here is nearing a boil. Alright, so after a couple minutes, we'll come back and we'll dump this into here. Alright, so the grains have been discarded. Now it's time to pour this into here. And we're going to crank up the heat on this. Then, so all of this steep to convert steps have been done. We're going back here to step 4. Bring your wort to a gentle rolling boil. Then, add only one of the included LME cans to the boiling wort. Continuously stir the extract into the wort as it returns to a boil. Alright, so this is already nearing a boil. And when it gets there, we'll add the liquid malt extract. I'm sorry guys, I have to go back. I forgot one major step that's very key to home brewing. And that's you have to have one of your previous home brews while you're brewing, or else it just doesn't turn out right. So, cheers. This is another beer I made last year. It's a copycat of Bell's Oberon, I believe. It's a little early in the season for it. It's early spring, but beer is beer. So just had to make sure I included that very important step so you guys don't mess up your home brew. Alright, as we're nearing a boil on the boil kettle, we're about 4 degrees, 3 degrees now away from boiling. Back on a serious note of notes I want to go over. Just wanted to go over the brew day schedule one more time to make sure that's clear. So the 60-minute boil time doesn't start until your pot comes to a boil. Like this just did actually. So I'm going to turn it down so I can explain this to you guys. So at the beginning of your 60 minutes, you're going to add your 1 can, this other can, the other one's inside warming, 1 can of your liquid malt extract, and then immediately your Mount Hood hops. And then you boil it for 30 minutes with just the 1 can of the liquid malt extract and the hops. And then with 30 minutes remaining in your boil is when you add your other can. Boil for 30 more minutes, and then it's time to chill the wort. We'll get to that when we get to it. Alright, let's go add the can of the liquid malt extract and start this boil. Alright, here I've got our open can of liquid malt extract. I've turned off the burner because this is very thick and dense and it will go to the bottom. And we don't want to scorch it, so what we're going to do is as we pour this in, and hopefully not get any all over dripping down the side of the can, I'm going to stir it. I have beautiful color on that syrup. Scrape this out as best you can. This isn't the best tool for doing this. Guess what you can do is just dunk it in here. Swirl it around for a little bit. Dissolve as much as you can. Because this is where you get your flavor and your alcohol content from. This is the sugar. This is very sweet, very high sugar content. This is the food for your yeast. This is what makes your beer beer. Alright, so I'm satisfied with that. So give that a good stir. Get the torch back out. Start this up again. And we have to add our hops, if you remember. Our Mount Hood hops. Here they are, right here. Open this bag. Give this a good stir. This is what the hop pellets look like. So these get added directly in. 1 ounce of Mount Hood hops. See, they kind of break apart and make this kind of sludgy type material consistency to the wort. It's fine. It all settles out. And once this gets back up to a boil, we will start our timer. 60 minutes. And halfway through that, we'll add our other can of the liquid malt extract. Alright, we are well underway on our boil now. About half done with my beer. Gonna need another one. But now it's time to actually talk about what the next steps are going to be, which will be once the boil is done, we need to cool it down. Now, I don't know why everyone says it needs to be cooled down so fast. I'm sure there's some science behind it that I'm not familiar with. But basically, once your boil is done, they say you need to cool it down to room temperature, fermentation temperature, as quickly as you can. You're not supposed to just let it set out and come to temperature on its own. And obviously you can't pitch your yeast right after it's boiled, or else you'll kill all your yeast. So what we are going to do, camera around here, is we have what's called a wort chiller, and basically it's just a heat exchanger. This part here hooks up to a garden hose. The water comes through here, and you set this copper part in your boil kettle after it's done and it needs to cool. And then this tubing, you just set out in the driveway or something and let it dump out there. Let me zoom out a little bit. Here we go. And basically, you just turn on the hose and cold water comes through here and pulls all the heat out of your boil kettle to cool it down as quickly as you can. And it actually works really well. It's really awesome. I'll show you guys that for sure. But during the boil here is when we need to do the #1 most important step in all of brewing, which is sanitizing your equipment. On brew day itself, not bottling day, but the brewing day, there's not too much equipment to sanitize other than your carboy or your fermenter. A lot of people do it in 5-gallon buckets, which is fine. And then any equipment that is going to touch your beer once it is cooled down. So your carboy here, and you have an airlock in your bung. And I mentioned before that this is filled with a no-rinse sanitizer, so you just make contact with it for about 30 seconds, you dump it out, and you don't have to rinse it with water and risk recontaminating the equipment that you just sanitized. So that's what we're going to do next. Alright, so this has been sitting in my basement for a while, uncovered, so I gotta pour some water in here just to rinse it out. This is just normal hot tap water, it's not sanitized. And do this a couple times. Just cover it with your hand, vent it. Dump this in the driveway. Use the rest of this gallon of water to do that. Do the same thing, just make sure it's clean. And wipe down the outside of this too. Alright. Alright, so now this is clean, but it's not sanitized. So what we're going to do, take our bucket of sanitizer here, take our funnel, got a couple gallons of sanitizer in here, it's probably way overkill. Pour some in there. The same thing. Good contact on all the surfaces. then I actually like to get a paper towel and soak it in the sanitizing solution and then lay it over the top of this. So that's what I'm going to go do. Alright, so I've got my paper towel here. I'm going to throw this in here, let that soak. Give this one more swirl. I'm going to dump it back in the sanitizer bucket. Make sure I get this neck of it real good. Use that paper towel and make sure everything up top's clean too. A little foam's not going to hurt. You can get most of it out. So this is a no rinse sanitizer. So the foam doesn't hurt. I'm OCD and I like to get a lot of it out. A lot of it will go away on its own anyway. It'll kind of, all the bubbles will pop and it'll all settle at the bottom. No issue at all. Alright. So now I'm going to take this, just kind of drape it over the top so nothing can get in. Now that is ready. And the funnel is soaking in the sanitizer solution, and that's what we'll use to eventually pour the wort into the fermenter. Alright, we're halfway through our boil now, which means we now add our second can of the liquid malt extract. So again, I'm going to turn this off so there's no chance of scorching. Pour this in. And this one I'm not going to dip in and rinse out because this one, the label kind of started falling apart when it was soaking in the hot water, so I don't want any of that to fall off into the wort. I'll just scrape it out as best I can, and we'll call that good. Good enough. Alright, let's get this boiling again. Keep her stirring. Should come back almost instantly. I don't know if you can tell or not, but the wort definitely has a darker color to it now. Now we continue the remainder of the boil, which is 30 more minutes. Alright, so here we are boiling away. We are about 1 minute away from the end of our boil. It doesn't have to be an exact science, but what we're going to do now is put this wort chiller into the wort so it can sanitize and not have to worry about contaminating the wort. Now this is all kind of frozen in place here because it's pretty cold today and it kind of locked up in the position that it was last in. But once the water gets flowing through this, it will release and straighten out. Alright, so I'm going to go get the garden hose and we'll hook it up to the other end. And I'll show you guys how well this works. And I gotta go outside and turn on the hose, but I don't want this to splash out everywhere. So what I'm going to do for the time being is stretch this out here and then this old plastic drum I have here, I'll sit on top of it for now. I know you guys can't see that, but trust me, it's here. Alright, we'll turn on the water. Here we go. Got hot water coming out. Excellent. Garden hose hooked up. This is icy cold, and this is hot. Warm at least. All right. So that'll be cooling this down very quickly. I am going to stick the temperature probe back in it just to watch how fast it goes down. Alright, now it's warmer than 102. It was resting right up against one of the coils. The municipal water coming through right now, checked it a couple days ago, is in the mid 40s, and that water there is in probably the 60s. 20-degree temperature differential just from going around the loops in there just a few times. It says 126. I don't believe it though. It's going to be warmer than that. Let me shake this around a little bit. That's what it says. I still don't believe it. I don't think it's that cool yet. Let's stick it in the middle here, 150. It's probably more accurate. Alright, so we're going to let this continue to cool. And once it gets down to room temperature, give or take, we will add it to here. And then I have on this carboy, the bottom of this tape is the 5-gallon mark. So I'll empty the wort into here, and then I have 3 gallons of distilled water, which theoretically is contaminant free. I'll top it off, and then from there you need to aerate your wort. So shake it up really good, get the oxygen back into it, and then you can pitch your yeast and shake up your yeast as well. Alright, check back in a few. Alright, so here we are, just about 5, maybe 7 minutes later. It was that quick. It's already down to 71 degrees even after I've stirred it. So it's done. So I'm going to go cut the hose off, pull this out, and then we will throw it into the carboy. Alright, the sun was setting too low, so I had to close the garage door. Still see what's going on. So take the paper towel off that. This funnel's been soaking in here for quite a while now. Take the excess off. Stick it in there. Bring the pot of wort over here. We're going to pour almost all of this in. And we will leave out the very bottom sludgy stuff that contains a lot of the grain dust and a lot of the hops. If you get some in, doesn't matter. It'll all settle at the bottom of the fermenter. Turn here so I can see in the pot a little better. You want to get as much of this as you can, because like I said before, we're going to be topping this off with water to get to 5 gallons. So the more of this you discard, the less of the beer flavor you have. And that's all but just about maybe a cup. So now, I've got distilled water just in the house here. Start adding this a little at a time until we get to 5 gallons. It's 1 gallon. I got the tape marker here on this side so I can see exactly when we hit 5 gallons. It's going to be just about the bottom. Just a splash more out of the next one. Right there's 5 gallons. Alright, so now what we're going to do, pull the funnel out. Got that paper towel that we used before to kind of keep it sealed from getting contaminated while we were boiling. Put this back over the top. Pick it up with your hand on top so it doesn't splash everywhere. Shake it. But there is a temperature differential from the garage here, which is cold, so it's going to vent. Want to make sure you don't build up too much pressure in there. Again, this is to get oxygen back into the wort for the yeast to use. All right. So now we're going to add the yeast and shake it again. Here's the yeast I'm using. I forgot to say, before we add this, we do want to just dunk this in the sanitizer real quick, just to make sure that anything that's on the outside of the package get sanitized. All right. It's open. So there's the yeast in there. Carefully pour this in here, try not to get much on the sides if possible. Last time with this. It's already got the oxygen in it. So we're just really just shaking this around to get the yeast incorporated into the wort. And that's pretty much it. So now we're going to get the airlock, which is in here. Get the bung. The bung goes in. It's got a hole in the middle. This airlock is filled with sanitizer, so as it ferments, the carbon dioxide that's produced comes up in here and has to bubble through here, so there's no possible way that contamination can come in this way. And that's it. There's a little red cap that if I find, I'll put on here. Not necessary at all. So now I'm going to move this to its home for the next 2 weeks or so, which is in a cool, dark place in my finished basement, which is heated. Is the perfect place for that. I think the direction said somewhere between, what does it say? I have it right here. Between 64 and 72 degrees. And I have a little sticker thermometer on the side of this that'll tell me if it's in a safe range. And then 2 weeks from now, we will, it's called racking it into a secondary fermenter. Kind of get rid of some of that sludge and let it settle a little bit further. Alright, so we're all moved into the basement. It's a spot for the next couple of weeks at my computer desk without a computer. You can see the temperature here. This cool little wheel from Northern Brewer. The temperature that it is the one that's visible. So we're at about the 70 degree mark, which is within the range for ales, as you can see, which is what this is. And no action yet in the bubbler, but there will be probably by later tonight, definitely by early tomorrow morning. So this is part 1 of a series of homebrewing. Hit the subscribe button. Please like, share, comment. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Stay tuned for part 2. Thanks for watching. Bye.